this situation is just detrimental to the whole team, the whole franchise, and it's going to just railroad their whole year. So do what's best for the team that you're going to have on the court for all of this year and in the future. Don't just be so short-sighted. So, yeah, you're right. Both of them, in my opinion, Eric, are to blame. So, Eric, we're recording here on Tuesday night. The NBA season has tipped off. So, as we're on the heels of your guy, LeBron James, playing in his first official regular season game as a Los Angeles Laker, LeBron was all over Twitter this weekend as he found himself on stage at the Staples Center with none other than his boy Drake. So, LeBron, Eric, he's got a lot of things going on off the court right now. He's got potential movie deals. He has his production company that has their hands in several projects. There's 2 shows for NBC his company is involved with. So there is more of LeBron James from the business side off the court going on than we've ever seen or ever talked about throughout his entire career. Now he's in LA where we know distractions are paramount. So is all this off the court business that LeBron is up to, is that good or bad for the basketball LeBron?
I'm certainly nervous about this, Justin, as someone who is a LeBron apologist almost all of the time and defends him no matter what he does. This has me concerned because it doesn't take long after you move to LA, if you're LeBron James, before Hollywood has taken over you. Whether some of these things were in the works before he went there or whether he's just fully invested in the Hollywood lifestyle in the last few months, this was inevitable, and I just didn't think it was going to happen this much and this fast. And so when he's being the mentor of a young team and he's doing so many other things other than basketball, it leaves me very concerned. Now, we don't know until we see his performance on the court. If his performance on the court is up to the standard that he has shown us for the past 14, 15 seasons, then I'll let the topic go. And he can do whatever he wants in his private life outside of basketball and be in all of these movies and on stage and do whatever he wants. If he's starting to struggle on the basketball court and it's hurting his team, then I have a real problem with it, even as a LeBron fan.
No, I think you hit the nail around the head. I think you have to have some level of concern because you know this team is going to go through some level of struggle this year. We've seen it happen with nearly every team that LeBron has moved to, whether it was Miami where he had more veterans and more talent around him, or even to move back to Cleveland, they hit roadblocks along the way. And now all of a sudden you have this story sort of off the court built in where you know the media is going to ask those kind of questions when this team goes on a 3 or 4 game losing streak and maybe LeBron's numbers aren't up, or he's going to go through stretches where he looks tired, or if something does happen, he struggles with injuries this year where it's going to come up. Well, is LeBron too focused on his off-the-court projects and didn't put enough time in to get ready to be on the court? Regardless of what we see LeBron is doing, and I think his answer will be, well, I'm not playing basketball 24/7. I have the ability and I have the team around me in place that they can do a lot of these things and use my name and use the resources that we have to go this route. So I just don't think it's a good look because, like you said, we don't know how involved he was when some of these projects, but as much as he's covered and as much as he puts out on social media, he didn't seem like he had any of this much around him at any other point in his career. I mean, this stuff it's just been on and on and on. And you see TMZ and you read these other reports of him holding late night dinners and meetings and all this different stuff where if that stuff was going on and it just wasn't reported, I would be shocked because it seems like everything now gets reported with these guys, especially LeBron, who, let's face it, LeBron uses his social media to self-promote himself and what he's up to and what he's doing. So I don't think that he would just hide this for the last however long he's had this going on. So I don't think this can be a positive for him at a player that's probably got 3 or 4 years left at his peak. And that's probably pushing it for what we've seen with the NBA of why you would let these distractions come in now, or these potential distractions come into you when you're going to have a lot of time here in the coming years to be part of all this stuff. And LeBron's still going to have a name where just because he's not on the court doesn't mean he's not going to have these opportunities. So it's definitely a storyline that's going to be worth following because I have a feeling, Eric, that at some point during the year, we're going to be talking about this topic again. But can't wait to start following the NBA and some of these storylines that are going on. Again, we talked about the Golden State Warriors. They are the team to beat. I can't wait to get in, Eric, as the season gets on as well, talking about, is this the last year we'll see this Warriors team together? And will that sort of be their rallying cry to get another title for this group, because it's not going to look the same after the season? Lots of rumors out there about players going different directions after this year, but we'll cover that in our upcoming episodes. So let's swing it over to NASCAR and what happened on the track. Typically, Talladega, a wild race, one of my favorite races to watch. I know, Eric, you're the same way, but this was a bore fest. This was basically 4 cars out of the Stewart-Haas stable. They decided to team up, run together, and they basically ran away from the entire pack, kept themselves safe. It was a brilliant strategy by them, as they have 4 cars currently in the playoffs, and how to keep those cars clean and keep them out of the big packs and avoid the big one. They were so fast, they broke up the whole pack and basically set a pace where guys couldn't even come down before the stages in pit without going a lap down, because they had such a big lead on them. But as we got down to it, we didn't have the big one. We had a couple little ones that brought out some late cautions. And because of those cautions, and because of what he felt was an extra unneeded lap ran under caution, Kurt Busch ended up running out of gas, coming to the checkered flag. Now, Kurt Busch was frustrated not only at the extra lap, but the fact that after he took the white flag going into turn 1, Matt DiBenedetto pounded the turn 1 wall. Quite a few cars were involved in a wreck, and NASCAR did not throw the caution flag, let the cars race back to the checkered flag. During that time, Kurt Busch ran out of fuel and opened the door for Eric Almirola to get his first win in a Stewart-Haas car and advance to the round of 8. So, Eric, let me ask you, should NASCAR officiate the last lap differently than they officiate laps prior to that?
This is definitely a tough one, and it's a tough decision for NASCAR to make. The problem is at a super speedway where the speeds are enormous and you just can't stop the car. My concern would be that even though DiBenedetto, Chase Elliott, others had maybe washed down the track and were off the racing surface, what if you have another accident on that final lap where they didn't throw the caution and you have cars that are skidding now at 150 miles an hour into a car down in the median or in the grass that's at a dead stop? That would be such a violent impact that's a very dangerous situation. Not only that, the reason that they throw the cautions when there's a situation like DiBenedetto or Elliott had is so that the safety workers couldn't come out. And you definitely don't want safety workers out there when the other cars are then making their way around the track at 180, 190 miles an hour. The problem with NASCAR, as it usually is that they can't make a consistent decision from one race to the next, how they police and monitor things. So I appreciate the fact that they want the fans to have a green flag finish. I think that's something that is admirable about NASCAR in terms of they've got all these fans that paid money for these tickets and they're trying to put on the best show possible. But if it comes at the detriment of some of their racers in a potentially tragic event, that would be horrendous. And so they're in a bit of a box. And I understand Kurt Busch's point. His point is that, look, in the past, you would have thrown the caution here. This year, you didn't. You already ran me an extra lap than you really needed to, and so I'm a lap shorter than others. And he wasn't the only one, by the way, that ran out of gas. There were other big names that ran out of gas. So here's the thing. Had NASCAR thrown the caution, there wouldn't have been just Kurt Busch. There would have been a lot of cars, maybe even 90% of them, that would have come down pit road for a splash of fuel before the next green-white checkered. So Kurt Busch likely doesn't lose his spot, likely comes back out at least in the top 3, because he's not going to lose that much time barring a penalty on pit road. So him and everyone else who is close on fuel is going to come down pit road all together. They're all going to do the same thing. They're going to go into that green-white checkered, and then you have the finish for the fans. I understand why Kurt Busch is frustrated, and I think it's a tough call for NASCAR. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario for NASCAR. But I also understand Kurt Busch's frustration.
I just wish NASCAR would be transparent and just tell us what their plan is. Okay, if all the cars are rolling and we've radioed that all the drivers are okay, we're just going to let it play out. They don't do that at any other point. In fact, what actually the caution that came out prior to that was a wreck that happened right before coming out of turn 4, before they got to the start-finish line, and they threw the caution flag. So NASCAR just has to be consistent. If they want to officiate the last lap differently, then just tell us. That's all you have to do, is just tell us. But what will happen is Now there'll be an uprising. You've seen now Kurt Busch come out publicly and complain. People start to question it. And the next race, when they take the white flag and they're coming around with a good battle for the lead, there would be a wreck behind it, and they'll immediately throw the caution flag and they'll say, oh, well, now they'll overreact to it. So all we want is transparency on NASCAR's part. Just tell us what your plan is. If that's what you want to do, fine. If you decide that if all the cars are rolling, you're not going to throw a caution so you can get a checkered flag finish and not end the race under caution once they've taken the white flag, I think every fan would be fine with that and every driver would be fine with that. But just tell us what you're doing. Don't keep flip-flopping back and forth. That's the problem. And you said it. That's the problem with all of NASCAR stuff. Everything is either an overreaction or inconsistency, and that's what frustrates the drivers and it frustrates the fans. And Eric, sometimes we don't even get a chance to hear what the drivers think or what the drivers are feeling after incidents like this happen because of the way that NASCAR sets up their media. All the cars come down pit road. The drivers are all outside their car. What we've seen from the NASCAR media group or the reporter pool that typically follows NASCAR is there's just not as many of them. So if you have multiple storylines going on, a lot of times the drivers do their media, wait for TV or radio, and then they hit the road. They're back to their buses. They're getting changed, and they're trying to get out of the track to their planes and get home. But that always isn't the best for the sport. And it's come out some back and forth between several of the NASCAR reporters and the drivers kind of going back and forth on ways to sort of fix this. But in a time when this sport is in need of every bit of publicity and good PR and just getting out these storylines to help drive viewers to the track and to the TV, should NASCAR change this?
Yeah, I've got nothing really to add on this because I think where you're going with your question and what you're leading into is 100% correct. They've got to figure out a way to give these drivers more face time and more personality. You're seeing less and less commercials on the TV. I mean, probably some of the last NASCAR commercials I saw were all of the funny Carl Edwards commercials when he was doing Subway ads. Outside of that, I don't even remember that many NASCAR commercials other than Dale Jr. and some of the Mountain Dew things that have happened that have been really pretty funny, actually. But there's just not that much face recognition to NASCAR drivers. I mean, if Ryan Blaney, as popular as he is within the NASCAR circle, were walking through my local town, I don't think anyone would even know who he was. I mean, he wouldn't be famous. It's not like if Michael Jordan were walking down the street. And you're never going to have that with a NASCAR driver, but you should definitely have some of that if these are the superstars of your sport. I think Jimmy Johnson could probably walk down the street and only 25% of the people would recognize him, maybe even Jeff Gordon. So anytime you have a media availability for these drivers to get FaceTime, to get recognized, to get their personalities known, you have to find a way to do it. And like you said, with them struggling to get viewership, brand loyalty, and just all of these things going on in the background, even outside of the product on the track, it is something that they've got to figure out. So short and sweet answer is, yeah, Justin, where you're leading with that question, I think is 100% correct. They've got to do something that just makes it more personal for the fans and makes it relational so that we can relate to the drivers and actually have favorite drivers again. This era of favorite drivers, Dale Earnhardt Sr., Dale Earnhardt Jr., Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, that's going away to some degree because we just don't have as much. And it's crazy in a day and age where we have as much access as ever through social media and Instagram and Twitter and everything else. I just still don't feel like there's a lot of personality being promoted in NASCAR right now.
And I understand some of the driver frustration as well, because I saw Ricky Stenhouse tweet out that he finished third and he did an interview and it never even hit television. And that's an opportunity where he's standing there. He's got his sponsor on his uniform, his sponsor on his hat, and he's getting a chance to talk about his day, his team, and his sponsor. And if that doesn't make it on television, then I do understand his frustration to say, well, hey, if I'm not going to be covered and I'm going to take the extra time to do this and it's not really going to make a difference, then why am I going to stand around and do this? Once I do my availability, I'm gone. I've heard other drivers talk about going to the media center as part of the top three and not even being asked a question and feeling frustrated of like, okay, why am I here then? So things have to be changed on both sides. The media has to do a better job of covering the sport. Again, there's not a lot that's left of them. And you start to wonder, okay, are some of these things all now related where people just aren't reading certain writers and reporters because they're not getting as many clicks. There's not getting as many views because people aren't following the sport as closely because there's not as much personality out there. So this may be what's come first, the chicken or the egg. It's a cyclical type argument.